Aloha! I'm Jason Schwartz, you know me, and you very likely know Senator Roz Baker.
Aloha.
Hi Roz, how are you?
I'm good.
Thank you for taking the time to
My
sit
pleasure.
with me. Here we are in 2014. I have a hard time saying that, being that just the years keep rolling by. You've been the representative there in the West Side for, what, how many years would you say?
I just completed my 22nd year in the legislature. I started out in the House in 1988 and served for 10 years. Then I went to the county, was Economic Development Coordinator under Mayor Pana at the time. And when I came back to the Senate in 2002, the district was South and West Maui. So I started out on the west side, did a little stint, was west side, Molokai Lanai. Did a little stint with west side, Molokai Lanai, and central Maui, and then now south and west Maui.
You're just waiting for the plane to go by. See, this is a
This is a live show,
live show.
Outside.
We're here in North Kihei. We're trying to find a spot that made some sense. So you've been a representative and you represent a district, but I know that when you're in the State House, we all have to make decisions statewide.
Yes.
Would you feel that you've been a strong leader in bringing things to your district, or do you find your job to be more, I'll give you an example. There was a thing about GMO labeling. You know, it goes out and people are waiting for it, and it goes in committee. Well, that's sort of not an area thing. That's an all statewide thing.
Right, right.
And yet there are things they need money for this and money for that. Do you spend most of your time with specific issues for your area, or for general things, or what do you spend?
Well, it's really a balance. You know, there are 3 senators from Maui in the state Senate. There's 25. And so we work together as a team on the district things, on the things for Maui County, because I have some interests that I want to take care of in Kihei, Lahaina, and Senator Gilkeith Agaran is looking out after Central Maui, Kahului, and Wailuku, and Senator Kalani English has Upcountry, East Maui, Molokai, and Lanai. So we want to make sure that whether it's school buildings, something for Maui Memorial, something for UH Maui College, that we're all advocating for those things that are going to help Maui.
I see.
And then, you know, we each have our own committee interests. So my committee, I'm the chair of Commerce and Consumer Protection. Kalani has Transportation and International Affairs, and Gil is vice chair of tourism and some other committees. He's a former judiciary chair, sits on Ways and Means along with Kalani. So together we cover a wide range of interests, and we try to look out for the things that are going to be affecting our district, but also take care of problems, whether it's healthcare or mortgage foreclosures or housing or whatever, that are going to be affecting not only our district but affecting nationwide, our statewide rather.
Do you find yourself generating legislation or kind of fielding? Everybody's submitting legislation,
Well,
and very few things relatively hit the floor for vote. I mean, I didn't understand this until I was watching someone who said they spent $15,000, I don't know how that stands, in lobbying. And I asked them, what did they do with the money? You know, people think, oh, they're paying off senators, you know. But meanwhile, it's making copies of their position and sending it out to everyone, and the cost of things involved with making their position known.
Well, you know, for neighbor islanders to be impactful at the legislature, you, I think, rely on your senators and your representatives, but you also can email us. We have a wonderful website, www.capital.hawaii.gov. That's the legislature's website. So you can submit your testimony, you can follow bills online. We try to make it as easy as possible for people to interact with the legislative process, because it's important that we hear from our constituents. Let me give you an example. because we're working on a new high school in Kihei, it needs a name. And some of my colleagues thought that it would be a wonderful way to honor Congresswoman Patsy Mink. Very much in support of education, very much wanting to make sure that women had equal athletic opportunities to men, and she was very much involved in higher education as well as lower education when she was in the Congress. So there was a bill introduced. It was part of the women's package. I signed on to it. I'm a big fan of Patsy Mink, and we had hearings. And it generated some controversy because people wanted it to be named Kihei High School. Well, we already have a Kihei High School. It's the charter school. But it was a good opportunity to engage young people and others in the community. And at the legislature, our Committee on Education has the ability to have interactive hearings. So we had the charter school set up a site in Kihei so people could testify. We set up a site at Maui High School, which where a lot of Kihei students go for their high school education. And it was a real opportunity to hear from the community without the community having to get on a plane, get a taxi or the bus to get to the Capitol. So that's one of the things that we in the legislature try to do, and we're hoping to do more of that because we want the community to be engaged and involved.
Now, I myself have had, when I call your office or call you, I get response. And would you say you have your schedule has time for people? You know, in the elections, you hear all kinds of things being stated, you know.
Well, you know, I have a really good staff. And a lot of times people will call the office. I'm the first letter in the alphabet of senators, so I get all kinds of calls, not just from my district, that want information, and we try to provide that information. My staff is really good at taking messages, and I call back when I can, but a lot of times people will leave me a work number, and by the time I get finished with hearings and all of the other things that I'm required to do for my legislative responsibilities, it can be 8 or 9 o'clock at night. And sometimes I don't get those calls back. I do the best I can, but sometimes, you know, people...
What I'm thinking about, you know, I mean, what I'm bringing it up for is, I find you to be available. If I had some issue that I wanted to bring to you, you're like, no, you're listening. And you've always been listening. Whether it's been election year, I remember a specific incident in the Pili where there was a retaining wall needed, where the water had come down and undercut the building. You probably remember that situation. And you're out there and involved, and sometimes you can help, sometimes you can't. It's all right. It's you know, I mean, when I see an election, I hear all kinds of things surface, and the things that surface, I try to sort of look at and say, well, does that seem right to me? I found you very open and available.
I try to be. You know, I try to answer my own email. If there's something that comes in that I can't respond to, I tell the caller, you know, I'm going to have my staff do that because they've got much more time and they can follow up on all the calls, because a lot of times with government you're playing phone tag. And you know, they're you know, during session I have a full complement of staff. Off session I have 2, but they're still very attuned to the district and they want to respond to people. And a lot of times I find sometimes the issues are not something that the state can deal with, but we need to hand it off to the county, or we need to involve our congressional delegation. So that's one of the things that we try to do, is find out where the appropriate place is connected, and then follow up to make sure that people get an answer.
I had a conversation with Kimo Apana, and I thought, that's interesting. He was mayor and had real hands-on experience here, and now potential to go into the state house. Do you, between House and Senate, work together also?
Absolutely, absolutely. You know, Kaniela is the representative, Kaniela Ing, Representative Ing from South Maui, and Representative Angus McKelvey from West Maui. And, you know, we meet and talk story and try to help each other out. We introduce companions to each other's bills, because it doesn't matter whether it's a House bill or a Senate bill, so long as you can get it through the process and get it up to the governor's desk and get it signed, it still becomes law. So yeah, we try to work together. In another time we used to have meetings as a Maui County delegation. We don't. Everybody's schedule's a little crazy or more hectic these days, so we don't do that. But we still talk story, we still email each other, and our staffs work well together. So that's really important because we want to make sure that all of the issues that come to us, whether it comes to me or to Angus or Kaniela, can be addressed. Because there's no wrong door when you're talking to a member of the Maui delegation. You know, I have folks, because I used to represent Lanai and Molokai, that, you know, say, you know, can you help us with this? And then, you know, I go talk story with Senator English's office as an example and find out, yeah, they're working on it, but maybe they didn't have the contact information that I had for this individual. So we share, because we try, you know, our whole goal is to problem solve, to try to help people out, and to try to do things that are going to improve the quality of life for Maui County residents and statewide as well.
I got you. Any issues that are your pet things? I mean, things that you're advocating or would like to be sure that the voters know about you that you think is important for them to know about?
Well, you know, I think the important thing is to know that I'm a real people person, and I'm working very diligently on things that affect people, whether it's health care, cancer care, working on consumer protection issues. You know, we have a lot of scams going on. And we passed a measure this year to expand the programming that's done by the Department of Commerce and Consumer Affairs directed at our kupuna, because they are the most vulnerable. Maybe they're not aware as others might be of, you know, if it sounds really too good to be true, probably is, you know, and they're not as skeptical, particularly with the scams that people call and say, you know, I know your grandson or your granddaughter and they're having this problem, and if you just send me some money, I'll take care of it. Yeah. And too often, you know, if you're talking about family, you forget to ask the questions. And so we want to make sure that our bankers and others who help kupuna out can be as on it as possible. So we've provided some training and some ability for them to really help the kupuna by saying, well, let's delay getting this transaction. Let's really check to see if this is in your best interest to do this. So
it's legislated in, like in the mortgage business where they have a truth in lending thing. They want to be sure that there's information provided. Same kind of thing.
And what it is working with the Department of Human Services, working with the Executive Office and Agent and the bank to make sure that the questions are asked. You know, if there's a caregiver involved, they're included in the discussion, so that a kupuna doesn't come to the bank and say, oh, I'm gonna take out $5,000 today, and maybe there's not much more than that in the account.
Oh, I see.
Then they can ask some questions and really get to make sure that there's an appropriate response.
I mean, there's so many areas I can talk about. The one that seems to be the elephant in the room these days, in my world, is GMO. To me, I just am absolutely amazed. There must have been enough interest to get 20,000 signatures to get this thing on the ballot. Now, I remember, maybe it was last year, there was a bill about labeling. I don't know how that all goes. And it was hot and heavy, and then suddenly I didn't see it. Did it ever make its way to the light of day and get voted on, or it didn't?
The House sent a labeling bill to the Senate. It was referred to 3 different committees. It was referred to the Committee on Agriculture, Committee on Commerce and Consumer Protection, Committee on Health. And in the Senate, all 3 of those committees have to agree on an action or the bill doesn't move. And so we had a hearing. It was, I thought, a pretty thorough hearing. I did not chair the hearing. The lead chair was Senator Nishihara, who is the chair of Agriculture. And at the conclusion of the hearing, because the Attorney General had said that it's not the state's kuleana to require labeling, that's preempted at the federal level by the FDA. And I know people don't agree with that, but you know, as legislators, we really are required to rely the Attorney General's opinion in that area. And so there were questions around that. There were questions about testing. There were questions about what were the impacts going to be on food coming into the state. If, you know, we're a very small state, 1,300,000 or 4. And if we required that, would it mean that United States companies wouldn't come in and only the unregulated coming in from China and elsewhere would be coming in? What would happen to the food? What would happen to the cost of food? And there were just a lot of questions raised. And so the only thing that the three committees could agree upon was, let's ask Department of Agriculture, let's ask the feds, let's ask College of Trop Ag to do some economic analysis, to look to see what some of the issues are, how we might navigate this, what's happening in other states. And so we said, we can't agree on this bill. We're going to put all of this request in a resolution and we're going to go forward. I was asked as the second committee to announce the decision. So people assume that I created this.
I see. They think you're the one that made it.
And I've tried to explain that that's not how we work in the Senate. There's three committees that had jurisdiction. All three of us had to agree. I simply announced what the decision.
So how do we get something? I mean, I'm laughing when I say it almost, but something as simple to me as to ask a manufacturer to label to say yes or no or what's in it.
Well,
why is that such an issue that needs to be legislated?
Well, because the federal government requires certain kinds of information on labeling. And so if it's going to be something that people are interested in, and I know there is great interest, I read labels, it needs to be something that's uniform. So in the absence of federal action, what a lot of manufacturers and foodstuffs are doing is they are labeling if it's certified organic. That wouldn't have genetically modified material in it. Some are voluntarily doing that. And I think that's probably the way to go. I think the pushback at the federal level is because they feel like there's no difference between something that's been hybridized through genetically modification as to natural. And so the nutritional components, the genetic makeup of the product are the same. And so they feel like there's been sufficient testing, and I know people disagree with that.
I was going to say,
so
all that disagreement, it's still nothing you can do about it, 'cause it's not you just don't have the power to do that.
I believe
right?
that's the case.
Throw away all this mystique that goes around, because you've been a long time in office, and you know, I don't know. I never know when I see an election and I see good people that are working hard being told that they're not doing something. So I'm always curious. It's like easy to point, but now when you're sitting in that seat and you have to deliver an answer that's responsive, and you're stuck with the way the system works.
Well, and I know that people think, well, you know, we ought to have this home rule and we ought to do this, but you know, in our system of government, there are areas that are reserved to the counties or to the local level of government. There's areas that are reserved to the state. There's areas that are reserved to the federal government. And I think as policymakers, we need to do the best we can to make sure that all three levels are aligned and that we're working together, and that if there's information needed, we try to get that information. But it's not black and white. There are many shades of gray, and there's lots of complexities in a lot of these issues. And I think the more transparent and more open we can be, the more information that's out there. But you know, if people have determined that GMO is bad, it's going to be very difficult to change their mind. And I'm not trying to change anybody's mind. I'm just trying to say that, you know, there are limits to what the legislature can do, what the county can do. And I think if we all kind of work together to try to make sure that people understand the process and that they're open to looking at, how can we get more information out, how can we solve a problem, then I think people coming together with good faith and honesty can actually come up with something that would, I think, help local agriculture continue to use technology to survive and thrive, as well as give people the information that if they don't want to partake of that particular product that may have a level of GMO in it, is it one molecule that makes it GMO?
Well,
is it,
it's hard for me to be
1%,
the expert.
2%?
Well,
I don't know.
All to me, GMO, I mentioned to one guy and he was angry and he said, how can those people that talk about GMOs say that? Anyone that has diabetes, their life happens because diabetes and the cure and insulin came from a genetically modified, and that's what happened. So
Yeah.
it's a complicated subject, and the words, people use them for a broad brush
Right.
instead of specific.
Yeah. Well, I mean, biotech has brought us cures to cancer. People say, well, you're a cancer survivor, you ought to be anti-GMO. But there's no link, honestly, between anything that somebody's ingested as a GMO product and cancer. There just is not that tie.
And some might say, yeah, you've heard that one.
Yeah.
We haven't lived long enough. But I'm always wondering when that happens. I mean, I guess this may or may not be the forum for it, but if I were, I'm a person here and I'm thinking, we now have an initiative. If it gets passed, is there any reason that jobs would have to be stopped?
Oh yes,
Why?
because there would be a moratorium
So
on,
now,
on
but
anybody that uses genetically modified crops, grows crops that are that way, and until there could be a complete EIS. And so you're going to be putting people out of business, and for a period of time, because an EIS is not a short process, and it would mean that probably those jobs wouldn't come back. So there would be an economic impact to Maui County and to the farmers and to a lot of people who work on those farms and depend on those jobs for livelihood.
So how do we accomplish what everyone needs here? That's what we're basically at, If this initiative were to fail, then it means that the growing would still happen, but there's no labeling, so the people that want to know if it's in there...
the initiative has nothing to do with labeling.
That's why I'm bringing it up.
The initiative has
because
nothing to do with labeling.
It stops the growing.
It
right?
stops the growing.
So that's why it has to, that's what I'm saying. So you're saying the jobs would go away. They couldn't replace the jobs with other jobs?
No. I mean, you're talking about hundreds, maybe even thousands of jobs, and a significant segment of our economy is in agriculture. And the Hawaii State Constitution really puts a special place for agriculture, and we're all about trying to do sustainable agriculture, have our food security, and really make sure that the farms here and farmers can survive. And I believe that genetically modified crops as well as organic crops or non-genetically modified crops can coexist, and each has an important role to play. But if we're talking about feeding the world, it's just very difficult to think that only organic, which some people want only, can do that.
Well, when I'm hearing this, I'm thinking a way to solve the problem might be, allow them to still grow it, but if it stops the neighboring, it's a very complicated issue, because
It is.
if it stops the neighboring guy from being able to grow seed because his seed suddenly is sterile because of something been created from the neighboring field, so a lot of people say, I want my organic, I don't want your seed coming over here.
I did some research. There's been no organic certification that's ever been pulled from somebody because of any contamination from any place else. So I know that people are concerned about drift The evidence that I've seen indicates that that's not true. But I think if we can be as open and transparent as possible, and people are open to maybe a different point of view or some additional look at it, it would be possible. But that's really not, in my mind, the big issue.
What's the issue?
The issue is, how are we going to continue to diversify our economy? How are we going to continue to have really good paying jobs, and jobs that if our students go away to learn a trade or get an education, that they have an opportunity to come back, that we can
Absolutely.
continue to incent and to develop entrepreneurs, that we can look at ways to help the homeless, to get more people into affordable housing, get more people in rental housing. One of the things the legislature did this year was to put additional money into the Rental Housing Trust Fund, which helps developers develop multifamily rental housing. By working with with Department of Hawaiian Homelands, we can also help get more Hawaiians on the land and into their own homes. So it's the housing issues, it's the homeless issues, it's social service issues. To me, those are the issues that we really need to be tackling. And some of the other issues are very complicated and complex, but and maybe far-reaching down the road, but they need to be tackled at a different level. We need to be looking out for things that are really going to affect immediately the economy of Hawaii, economy of Maui County, so it can continue to grow, and we can continue to help improve and raise the quality of life for everybody.
Or replace the kind of, or replace or add jobs, so that when people lose their jobs because a legislation could happen that says, hey, we're not going to have any more GMO crops suddenly, and jobs are gone. I'd like to have some kind of...
Yeah, but you're not going to be able to replace the quantity of jobs that are being talked about like that. Our economy is not going to be able to absorb that. But, we need to do all of these kinds of things that help our ag industry, help our local farmers survive. The visitors want to come.
Complicated thing, isn't it?
It is. It's very complicated.
We all think we can have our cake and eat it too. And I know that the people that are anti-GMO are passionate.
They're passionate,
from the heart,
and I think they're very
sincere. Absolutely sincere, and are doing it only because they feel it's for the public good.
Yeah.
In many places of the world, Monsanto, they have the big, evil mustache for who they are. And that's a whole separate subject. I think it is. But, we all have to somehow figure out where our priorities are. And, if it's a tough one. If we suddenly lose 1,000 jobs and we have to replace them, but then the other group says, but we're not going to eat something that's going to make our health worse. It's a complicated life. I almost feel it's better that it's going out to public vote, but the public has to be understanding what it all means, don't they?
Yes, the public needs to understand the ramifications of every vote that is put on the ballot, whether it's a candidate or an initiative, and understand what it means for them and their families, as well as for the economy and for their neighbors who may be farmers. It's a threat, I believe, to a lot of the local lifestyle as well as our farming industry. I grew up in rice and cotton country.
Oh.
I know how difficult farming is. My parents were educators, they were not farmers, but I had lots of friends whose folks were farmers. And if you have rain at the wrong time, or you don't have rain, it can affect the rice crop, it can affect the cotton crop, and it affects whether your farm is going to survive. And it's not an easy business. And here we are on Maui, I think, trying to get young people to go into farming, to continue to farm, so that we have, wonderful strawberries and bananas and tomatoes and cabbage and onions and all of those wonderful things. I mean, we just invested in the Maui College's Food Innovation Center, so that we can create a place where farmers can bring, say, the strawberries that are not grade A, but still nutritional, still could be turned into purees for Whole Foods or Jamba Juice, or they could be turned into jams and jellies. But as small farmers, they don't have the ability to do the packing lines, the sterile lines, the canning lines, all of those kinds of things. But a center, a certified center at Maui College could do that. So we could help maybe dry some of the pineapple that can't be used as fresh, or we could do preserves or other kinds of things. It's a real opportunity to do value added for our farming industry, but the initiative threatens those folks as well as just putting a damper on the ag sector in Maui, and I think it's problematic. So, I want to look at what are the positive things that we can do
Well,
to help
these kind
agriculture.
of things need to be discussed because I'm sure everyone wants to make a good decision here.
Oh, I'm sure they do.
And so it's almost like there can't be a right answer at the end of this.
It's
process.
complicated, and like most problems these days, the solution is not in one side or the other side, but there's a middle, and people have to come together to find that middle. Compromise is not a four-letter word. It really is what helps us move forward. You bring the best ideas from both sides, you fashion something that's going to get and move the marble, the issue, the problem, solution down the road. And I really hope that that's what, we can have this dialogue. And, as we go from the primary to the general and people start to talk about the initiative, I hope there's going to be that dialogue and that willingness to, walk in the other person's shoes, to have that understanding and see if maybe
I hope this
isn't,
doesn't polarize us like the airport issue.
Right.
Years ago.
This shouldn't be, maybe the best issue is that the issue go down and some other approach come up. I mean, that's always possible. Because I've heard people say, well, I don't really kind of like that, but I'm concerned about this, so I guess I'm going to have to vote for it. But maybe, the council can help people see another path. Maybe other folks can help craft another path so that it's a win-win.
Right at the council, in fact, about this issue. It's just complicated.
It's very complicated.
When you speak to the council people, they don't want to make any decision. They want the public to make the decision. Instead of, what you just delivered here is very valuable because it's going out and people can process and hear. Do you get your position from things you read? Here we are in another subject. You have an opponent that says, I don't take corporate money. And then I never thought of you as someone gives you money for your campaign. Everyone always thinks, I'm sure, that there's somehow an influence that it's going to make you vote. They provide information just like anyone else would.
Absolutely. You get information from all kinds of sources. You get them from organizations that you know about, organizations you don't know about, different people in the community. UH is a good source of information. There's all kinds of information out there. It's a matter of sort of drilling down to what's the information. Is it peer reviewed? Is it coming from organizations that are reputable, or is it only coming from one side? I try to get a balance of information, and nobody ever has given me money with a quid pro quo in mind. Nobody ever says to me, Ross, I'm going to give you this check, but I expect you to vote XYZ. I don't do that. Never have. And I think I'm known for being one of the more substantive senators in the legislature who really tries to find solutions to problems and really does her homework. So that's my reputation, and I get very testy, shall we say, when people try to impugn my integrity because of the lens that they're looking through. Thankfully we are not the Congress, and we don't have some of these super PACs around, but you know, most of the people that give to my campaign are people that appreciate that I'm a hardworking, honest legislator who has a lot of integrity, who knows that I'm fair. They can give me information. I'll look at the information. I'll look at both sides and then try to make the best decision that I can.
I understand. Well, I've always, like I say, I can always call, just in the sharing we've done here, open and honest conversation. And then people have to make their decisions, but it's good to hear. I hope that people appreciate the fact that you are exactly what you just said. You're open and honest and willing to hear all sides of everything. We have a crazy time in our world.
Yes, we do.
And I am wondering how do you hope we can diversify our economy away from tourism? Can we get more self-sustainable? Is there a way to incentivize more jobs that can help diversify this economy?
Well, I think by really continuing our education process with STEM programs in middle school and higher, that's science, technology, engineering, and math, that we are giving young people the tools for the 21st century jobs that are coming available. And if we can help startups in Maui County, other places, you know, just with the small business innovation grants, you know, that really helps. Sometimes it's just a small amount of money that would help a fledgling business get off the ground, find capital in other areas, and really create new jobs. That innovation economy, bolstering that, sometimes it's tax credits, sometimes it's just small grants, but that to me is how we're going to continue to diversify. We need to take advantage of the technology that we have. You know, one of the measures we passed, and it's a little bit down the road, but I think it's the kind of thing that gives us opportunity. Hawaii used to grow a lot of industrial hemp. You cannot smoke hemp, industrial hemp, and get a high. If you smoke it, you're going to get very sick because it is not high in THC, which is what marijuana has. Okay, they are related, but not the same. Unfortunately, the feds still have industrial hemp on their banned substances. We passed a measure that would allow us to do a pilot project to see how we might be able to grow it on some fallow land and make it thrive. Because what you can do with hemp is not only grow or not only manufacture rope, which Hawaii used to be famous for, but you can use it to create building materials that are impervious to rot, to termites, to water, and they're lightweight. They can be manufactured here, and we wouldn't have to import so many things. So, you know, to me, that's an example of how we can take a product and use it. Look what Pacific Biodiesel is doing on the Big Island. They're taking macadamia nut husks and turning it into biodiesel. I mean, we have so many opportunities here, but we need to take some small test plots, do the business plan, figure out how it's going to work, and then that would be a way that we could, you know, like they're doing with coffee on the west side, is you get small farmers to take certain plots and they can grow these, and then in a co-op, and then you have enough for somebody to manufacture using that as a raw material. I mean, I really think we need to encourage and really expand our local businesses in that way. There's a lot of ingenuity in Hawaii. There's a lot of talent here. We just need to help them cut through some of the red tape and the paperwork that we are famous for creating, and see if we can't help these young businesses thrive. We've got some, you know, who ever thought that food trucks would be a thriving restaurant business? We've got some great ones here on Maui. We've got some good ones in Honolulu. And so I think by working with helping smaller activities grow, then they can employ people, they can add locations, they can grow, and we're creating a local entrepreneur and business community with local workers. Good jobs.
I know I can go on and keep asking questions. Any subject that you'd like to let our audience know? Any things that are otherwise important to you that you want to be sure?
Well, I'm very interested in making sure that Maui Memorial Medical Center comes up with a sustainable business plan, and I think that's going to require some legislation at the state level to enable that to happen. But they provide excellent services. It has just grown and improved over the years, but the state is not in a position to continue to subsidize our healthcare costs, because the costs are going up through reimbursements from Medicaid, Medicare, private insurance is going down, and yet we need to have these services, these quality services that we have, we need them to continue on Maui. So I'm hoping that we can come up with a way to create that public-private partnership that brings more private resources into the facilities. It keeps our unionized workforce, it keeps the jobs here, it creates more jobs. But that's something that I'm hoping that people will be paying attention to and working with us to make sure that we create that sustainable business plan for our hospital here, because it affects all of us. None of us want to just have to go off to Honolulu for everything. We need to have the good quality services here, and to me, our heart program, our stroke program are superior. We just one of the things I did a number of years ago was push through, with the help of many of my colleagues, an increase in the cigarette tax, and we put 2 cents of it to the UH Cancer Center, and we put some in our emergency services fund and our trauma system and in our community health centers. And those monies have been coming back to Maui. The helicopter, the special response unit and Maalaea, and for South and West Maui to back up the ambulance units. One of the ambulance units we got additional
all paid for by that?
All paid for by that special fund that we created. And Maui Memorial has just been designated as certified as a trauma center. So we're getting a new CAT scan that is state-of-the-art. It's really going to make diagnosis and treatment so much better, and that's being paid for out of the trauma fund. So it's the things that we do in Honolulu that have statewide impact that also come back to Maui. And I'm just so proud of the docs and the techs and the nurses and the administration over there for having the foresight to do a heart program here once they could prove that there was enough demand. We were sending too many people off. It needed to be done here. To start to do a regional program with Hilo and Kona. We've had helipad to helipad transfers and bringing people here for our stroke and for our heart program. It's just amazing. And we can continue to grow that, but we've got to have a healthy system, and that probably means some kind of public-private partnership to do that. So I'm excited, I'm energized, and I can't wait to get back to the legislature, see if we can't get these things in place that are really going to make a difference for Maui.
That's the most important other point. You're not in any way tired of your job. You go into it each time it's fresh. It's still vital and important to you.
It's exciting, and I enjoy working with people in the community to figure out, how can we tackle this problem? How can we, make sure that money for the Cameron Center or Big Brothers Big Sisters or the YMCA is coming back to Maui to put services in place that we need. That's the thing that I get excited about is, how can we help our schools? How can we help our teachers? How can we help our nurses? Because these are our friends, our neighbors. This is our community, and we want it to be the very best we can be.
Thank you for taking the time.
Thanks, Jason. I appreciate it.
I know it can go on and on.
Such a gentleman.
Roz Baker, State Senate District
6.
South
and West Maui. Don't forget to vote on August the 9th, or you can early vote on July the 28th.
Wow, coming up soon. Thank you for joining us. Hope this was helpful in giving you insight into another very important candidate, Roz Baker.
Aloha.
Aloha.